Hello to the fellows and the ladies. It's time to review Nickel Boys, the narrative debut of Ramel Ross, who you possibly, but maybe not, know from his Oscar-nominated documentary Hale County this evening, which I highly recommend. And this film takes place in the 60s in the Jim Crow era of the South, and it follows two black boys named Elwood and Turner who attend Nickel Academy, a reformed school which is essentially a fictionalized version of the infamous Dozier Academy. A school known for an abusive nature, corruption, and even being home to mass graves of some students. Going into this movie, I heard the buzz, but I was still a little nervous going in. I had heard that this movie implements a very interesting, shooting mechanism, I guess you could say. Majority of the movie is shot from a first-person perspective that shifts between Elwood and Turner. Almost like a video game-esque, but also not a video game at all. I was a little nervous that this movie could be a little gimmicky and also kind of fall into the kind of tropes we're used to with, like, films about black people and that deal with, horrific histories. And now that I've seen the movie, I think that this might be a masterpiece. This movie is so heavily operating on Ramel Ross's so singular vision. If you've seen Hale County this evening, you'll know that Ramel Ross is a very interesting director, especially when it comes to photography. And this movie doesn't skip a beat. The first-person perspective is not a gimmick at all. I found it very easy for me to grasp this, new perspective that we're not used to, obviously. I get why Ramel wanted to use this. This movie is very much about perspective more than it is about tragedy. Throughout the film, there's a lot of imagery and uses of, setting and what the boys do. A lot of it is very purposeful by Ramel Ross. The narrative of the movie is very experimental. Beyond the first-person perspective, the structure of this movie is very, unlike anything I can think of. Not even that. It's told mostly linearly. However, every now and then it will, cut to the future. We see, what life is like out after Nickel. These scenes are shot from, a third-person perspective. Only the back of one of them. He also implements a lot of stock footage of, the space race and Sidney Poitier's movies and Martin Luther King's speeches, and even a couple of photographs of the real Dozier Academy, I believe, all to really emphasize the perspective mainly of Elwood. Elwood is played wonderfully by Ethan Heresy, and Turner is played wonderfully by Brandon Wilson. Due to this perspective, where we don't get the most that we would typically expect to get from these kind of performances, but they're very natural and lived in. They feel like boys. The line delivery is excellent, as necessary for this perspective that they're going with here. Ingenue Ellis has a couple scenes to really shine, and she's truly amazing. It's I think she's in 3 scenes in the whole movie, and she's really nails it. She has such a natural warmth to her. But I think what really helped this movie elevate is that it feels like the antithesis to black drama porn. Even if that wasn't what Ramel Ross was setting out to do, this movie feels like, it reminded me a lot of American Fiction. What that movie was satirizing, what that movie was criticizing about how, a lot of these films about black history are really just, for white guilt. This movie is not really that. If anything, my one criticism of this movie is that I didn't really get that deep of a takeaway of Dozier. Although perhaps that is for the better, in a way. It does make you want to read the book that this film is based on. But I did feel that this movie wasn't really about the trauma that they endured. It's, it's about that, obviously. It's what they have to deal with. But it's more how, these two boys' worldviews and how they choose to survive. Elwood has a very hopeful, vibe to him. He's very loving and all that jazz, and he feels like the way to get out is to, work his way out. And then Turner has a little more of a, we gotta escape kind of mentality. He kind of succumbs to abuse in a way. There are horrifying moments of abuse in this movie and, certain things that are implied, but the movie doesn't really sensationalize that stuff or, stick on that. It's not really interested in trauma. It's more interested in the power of resiliency and how love can, be a good survival mechanism. Across the board, this movie is so well made. Cinematography is genuinely stunning. It's not meant to paint, gorgeous photos, but the first person perspective gives way to some of the year's most grabbing and like effective imagery. Even the tiniest things, like a scene early on in the movie where one of the characters is holding a balloon, it sticks with you for a long time. And I don't really see how this movie's like use of color, use of environment, use of the school, I don't see how that leaves me anytime soon. I love the use of ambient sound and score in this movie as well. Like, it gives this movie a different tone, not necessarily, like, it feels very experimental, but not in a way like, say, like some of like Zone of Interest score is very like crazy. This movie actually got from, like, yeah, there are some moments where the score emphasizes the horrors of the situation, but also can feel very warm. I think that's very intentional with a film like Nickel Boys, where you are, yeah, of course, dealing with something truly horrific, but the center of this movie is love. The ending really hits you with a gut punch, especially the last shot. For a lot of people, it's going to be like, oh god, that was just a twist. And in a way it was, but I do think that just saying it was a rug pull misses the point a little bit. Why this first-person perspective is so crucial to the film's overarching intention. We see how these two bond, we see how they connect to one another, how they kind of work off of each other. This movie is not about really plunging you into the horrible tragedy of Dozier Academy, or I guess Nickel Academy. It's not even about survival. It's about why people who survived. Nickel Boys is a simply stunning, singularly cinematic accomplishment. Even if unintentionally, Romel Ross's ambition makes way for a non-exploitative and a beautiful look at resiliency in the face of unspeakable. This is definitely a film that'll get better with subsequent viewings. And as rare as this is, I think I need to give Nickel Boys a solid 10 out of 10. I loved this movie a lot. I definitely needed to, time to swallow it, because the movie does throw a lot at you with its experimental nature, but I do think that this film is so worthwhile if you can get into it. Speaking of stock Oscars. Quick update, after I released my prediction video, I just decided, you know what, I need to take out Gladiator. I'm seeing Gladiator tonight, so maybe I'll change my mind. But I put Nickel Boys in, and after seeing the movie, I'm pretty solid on that. I'm pretty secure. I don't see the first-person perspective turning that many people off. I think what is going to turn people off is the narrative structure. Like I said, it's very experimental. It does kind of play with time a little bit, and it does play with archival footage in a way that I could see isolating some people. Even myself, I needed a second to fully process a lot of it. But I think enough people will take in what it is, the fact that it is hope over despair, the fact that this movie could be seen as important is important. I think most people agree this screenplay looks fairly likely. I'm not as set in stone on it as I was before, but I am actually pretty set that it will probably happen. And then as for director, I think Romel Ross is looking pretty solid. I don't know how you nominate this movie but not nominate Romel Ross. I know this is his debut, but he is an Oscar nominee for Hell County This Morning This Evening. I feel like that gives him a leap, that helps prevent the fact that this is his debut might hurt him. I don't think that'll hurt him anymore. I think tech-wise is where it gets a little dicey. This film has a relatively low nomination count. It'll get cinematography. I don't know if it would get sound. I don't know if it would get score. Editing a lot of the film, because of the nature of what it is, relies on a lot of long takes. However, it does implement a lot of fast cutting with archival footage. So actually, I do think that this movie has a shot at editing. I'm definitely going to put it in the short list at least. The biggest question mark for me is Anjanou Ellis. My takeaway for her was, even though she's amazing, I do think she definitely did enough to be considered, not nearly enough for me to feel any confidence. I don't know what I am predicting for supporting actors. I've seen Wicked. Ariana Grande is probably just getting in. I haven't seen Blitz yet. I don't know what I'm doing with Saoirse Ronan yet. Maybe Anjanou gets in out of lack of options. It's possible. But I also just kind of question how many people are going to be really passionate about this performance. I question that a little bit. So I am going to, maybe leave her out for now. I don't know. I feel good about director. I feel good about picture. I'm feeling really good about picture, honestly. I think that this movie will connect to enough people. I'm not saying, obviously you don't have to look that far to find people, a little put off by it. By its experimental nature, of course. But I think enough will go for it. And I think that means something. A lot of people are going to say it's their favorite movie of the year. I'm honestly toying with the idea of putting it at number one myself for my favorite of the year. I think it's experimental enough to stick out and get the votes. So that is it. That was the fucking review for Nickel Boys. Like, subscribe, and share. Bye-bye. Please go watch this when it comes out in a couple months. Bye!